But the idea behind this webinar is we are talking with municipalities and counties around the country and in Canada, and many of them have the same challenges and the same focus on efficiencies. Camino was actually built from the ground up uh, to overcome a lot of these. And we'll be talking about them, and hopefully some of these challenges and ideas will be helpful for you as well. Um, so wanted to first start off, and this is kind of the number one challenge that we're seeing out there is that, and usually when we rank them, people come up and say, if we could have an improved customer experience. And that actually means more than just in the application process, because what we are finding is there are challenges in the permit process even before it begins, and the idea of managing your information gatherers, right? How do you handle the average resident with no construction background that wants to put a pool behind their house, but they're not ready and they're just wanted to gather a bunch of information? And for a lot of cities and counties out there, this can take up a lot of their time because it's not simple, and it's based on a lot of different things. And so it takes, I've heard 20, I've heard 50% of their time answering residents' questions before they apply. Now we are finding, and cities say, well, we have all our information on our website and we have PDFs loaded there, et cetera. But to empathize with your residents, they're looking at all these zoning maps and permit fees and what does or doesn't apply for a permit, and they're just confused. And so invariably they call you guys. And we and I even run into cities that say we have our own guide. And initially I was surprised by that, but I looked into it. And just recently, the city of Tampa signed on with us for a guide. The challenge was they had a guide somewhat like this, where it was kind of, it had no idea about the zoning of the property or any examples on the project, but it tried to, in a static attempt, tried to pass on information. But as you can see, had a lot of, if applicable, if you're in a flood zone, this, if you're in a historical zone, you need to do something different. And so they invariably called into the city. And that's something that we hope to assist with. And what Camino is doing out there is, and how we're helping in both this situation and in the application process, is we're bringing in your GIS layers that affect applications, but it also affects the information that you would share. So things like, are they in a flood zone? Or I should say flood zone layers, historic layers, maybe even the city limits or the county limits, so that if someone comes to gather information and they're not in the city, it'd be nice just to tell them right up front so they don't have to call you and you figure it out and even take any time. But it's also, a nuisance for them to take additional steps. So we bring in all those layers. And so when we're asking the resident what their address is to start gathering information or start the application process, we already know a lot about the parcel itself. We know the zoning, we know whether the type of project could even be done on that parcel, et cetera. Then we move into the asking some simple questions, right? And the idea is, let's ask some questions that someone at 8 o'clock at night sitting on their couch can answer, and they don't have to stop and be frustrated and call you in the morning. These questions can be changed based on the zoning of the property. If they're in a flood zone, maybe we add a few more questions. If they answer yes to this question, maybe we add a few other questions to clarify it further. But at the end of the day, we provide them with information specific to their property and to the type of project that they're considering. And we'll go into that in a second. So at the end of the day, we have our front end guide, and maybe some people come in, gather information, and never apply, and that's okay. But now that guide can feed, in an intelligent fashion, feed the application in the application portal and just lay out what is required for this permit. So there's no confusion, there's no options. It's just give us these documents, fill out this form, pay this fee, whatever your process is. And then we go into the plan review all the way down to inspections. But the big difference is now when you get that application, it's a complete application. It's everything you wanted, and you're not running around chasing for additional information. So for more ideas on creating a better permit system, improved communication comes up a lot. Is there a way we can keep the person updated automatically on the status of their permit? Is there a way that the applicant can reach out to us for questions and it gets to the right department? But even more importantly, that conversation stays with the applicant, the application. So removing that he said, she said, the planning department said I could put my pool right on the property line. Well, you can look at that conversation and see that that wasn't the case because it stayed with the application itself. Also, which is becoming more and more a requirement today, is the idea of the ability for cities and counties to be able to control their own permit system. Having a permit system that doesn't have super high-tech coding that you or I can't even understand, but is in layman's terms. So even a permit tech in your department, if they're given access, can make simple changes as building code changes, fee schedules change. City of Albany, New York just recently signed on with us. And that was a big requirement because their planning and zoning department said their requirements were constantly changing and they needed a system that they could update in that way. So giving you that. Also, a system that can be configured to your processes. Sometimes we're finding some cities find out late that the permit system that they purchased forces them to change their process because it can't work that way. Just know today, when I'm showing you these systems in various steps, we can't show obviously every option that's out there, but no matter what your process is, we can set up the system so that it works that way. We have some cities that accept payment up front with the application. We have some cities that accept the application and then invoice the customer. Again, however it works best for you. And then finally, a company focused on continued innovation. We're seeing a lot of systems out there that partly due to the fact that they're built on older technology, a lot of their focus is on maintaining the system rather than innovating without the system. And that's something that we do not do. In fact, our system is being updated on a monthly, if not certainly quarterly basis, with some amazing ideas from our existing customers. We don't use them all, but those that we do, our customer base gets at no additional cost. So finally, some ideas for keys for excellence, and we're getting a lot from our customer base, getting a lot of good information on ways of creating excellence in the permit department. First off, the idea of identifying challenges early, right? With Camino, we can let this individual know that they're in a flood zone and there's additional steps that can be done, or You're in a historical zone, so you can't put a chain link fence around your house. Um, but also, just as importantly, the idea of your property isn't zoned for that. You are trying to put a multifamily home in an area that's zoned for single family. And so letting them know early, but also, maybe pointing them in the direction of the planning department, to see if, something can be done for that or not, but at least they're not going through the whole process and finding that out later. Also providing clear direction tailored to their specifics. We talked about how our guide does that. And so now even information tailored just to their specific project, but also the application. So now, again, less confusion, just do what it says to do, and you'll be good for that improved customer experience. Also being consistent when enforcing codes. One of the challenges every city and county is experiencing is there are some new hires within the department, and no matter how much training is done, invariably they forget something, and that can lead to challenges down the road. Or you have the applicant that tries to game the system. That seems to happen everywhere, where he calls in multiple times just trying to get a better answer on the same project. Now you have a system that stays consistent based on, the zoning and the answers to the questions that you don't have to concern yourself with there. Also offering services after hours. I talk with cities and many of them pride themselves on, they want to sit toe to toe with the applicant and walk them through the process. And that's great. And there really is a need for that for some applicants. But in today's day and age, there's a lot of applicants that don't want to do that. They're on their phones with Amazon or Uber, and they just want to get their answers quick when they want to get it, and they don't want to have to come in. And so being able to offer those people that option is helpful. Lastly, because I won't go through all these various steps, I just wanted to emphasize here, one of the neat things about Camino is that it does not have modules, right? So when we talk about planning and zoning, building permits, business licensing, the functionality that I'm going to be showing you today can be used for all these various items, right? So you don't have to, can I do this with that? The answer is yes. We even had one small city up in Michigan that used the functionality that we have within our system to build a system to sign up kids for Little League baseball within the town. I thought it was a really creative way of using our functionality, and they're happy with that as well. But let's jump into the demo itself here. Also, it's something I didn't emphasize in the beginning, but if there are questions, please feel free to ask them as we go. I have a few people keeping track of everything out here and will keep me honest. We'll also have some time at the end for questions and answers. But so first off, with Camino, we are hosted. So your IT people love us because there is no hardware or software that needs to be purchased, maintained, upgraded, etc. You're on the cloud. You can access Camino from anywhere, with internet access and a tablet, and, laptop, etc. And really all your IT team needs to do is to build a button on your website to take your applicants there. So in this example, if the applicant were to click here, they would come to a landing page a lot like this. Now, this is a demo site, so this has everything under the sun, from planning to licensing to zoning, even reporting a code violation. And even this, all the pages in Camino can be configured. We have some cities that even have just one button for residential building projects. That's what they're starting with. You'll see up here at the top, we have a Google-like search bar. So if an example, someone came in and said, well, listen, I'm just trying to put in a pool, they could type in pool and Camino would come back and say, are we talking about a pool house or a pool in a hot tub? And they're off to the races. But Camino can also organize your various types of permits. And so in this example, we'll go into residential. And you can see here we have, various options on ways to kind of go through, still have the Google bar up here, so to speak. And important to know as well, again, all configurable. If these isn't how you would name it, if you do it differently, that's great. And so here we're going to come to new accessory structure. Now we're drilling down on accessory structures. And in this example, we're going to say it's a guest house. So right off the bat now we say, what's your address? And you can see if their location doesn't have an address, but they have a parcel number, they could locate it that way. And we can bring in the city or county's parcel, GIS database in and utilize that there. So now in coming in for an address, 2802 Cheyenne Ave, you can see these drop-down options, in and around, this is in and around Pueblo, Colorado, but if it was, these would be drop-down options in your area. So we'll select this, search. You can see Camino now brings in, and you can see all these various parcel layers here, but Camino puts a bullseye here on this address, identifies this parcel, and they say, yeah, that's my house. And so we can continue. So at this point, Camino now knows a lot, right? We know the zoning of that property. We know whether they're in a flood zone, historic zone, all that fun stuff. And we can customize the questions that come up here. Like we said, we want to keep these things simple. What is the square footage of your structure? You can see all these pieces have and I'm not sure how to answer it button, but in this one, square footage, we'll say 2,000 square feet. Will the wall height exceed 10 feet? Well, if I don't know what you're talking about, I could click here and we give you the ability to clarify, whether with text, hyperlinks, attachments, what you're talking about. And the hope here at 8 o'clock at night, sitting on their couch, they can keep answering the questions. Does it include heating and plumbing? What will the structure's location be in relation to the house? We could have, kind of multiple choice options. And in this example, it's asking, do you have flood insurance? Now, this is a situation where the question was generated based on the zoning. This property is in a flood zone. And so we asked this question about, do you have flood insurance? And we say yes. If this individual was not in a flood zone, that question would not appear here. Will you be adding at least 1,000 square feet of impervious surface? We'll say yes and submit. Now we're looking to generate accurate fees. In this example, the fees are based on the structure and the project valuation. No matter how complex or simple your fee schedule is, we can generate the questions and do the calculations to generate accurate fees. So in submitting our answers, we have our guide and our application. So we can click right here and get started. You can see here now, and I'm sure a lot of people can attest, from past experiences, usually the only way you can get information out of a permit system is by applying and keep going through the steps. For the person that doesn't want to apply, now with Camino, you can see we have everything here from about your location, floodplain requirements, application requirements, even all the way down to fees. So if they want to see what their fees are going to be, they can see that here, right? So they didn't have to apply. They don't ever have to apply. But in this example, for brevity purposes, we'll assume they're ready to, let's say a week passed and they log back in and they're ready to apply. So they had seen information on setbacks because their property is in an R1 zone. And so here are the setback information. You'll see all of our steps include ability for the applicant to ask you a question and again, improve that communication. So I have a question and they rattle off their question for you. Camino can set it up so this question can, in this example, will go to the right group, planning and zoning in this example. We'll get this question as an email and they can respond right to the applicant through the email or maybe have a conversation. But the nice thing is this conversation is going to be saved with the application. We're also letting them know that their property is properly zoned for the type of work they're looking to do. Important to note that all these various steps are, again, configured by you. But now in this example, we're talking about floodplain requirements. Important to emphasize the only reason that this is here is because this property is in a flood zone. If they were not in a flood zone, this would not be there, right? We don't just hit them with a fire hose of requests and have them figure it out. It truly is customized to their situation. So we have in this example attachments that apply to flood zones that we can share with them, floodplain development ordinances, and here letting them know that because they're in a flood zone, they need to supply you with an elevation certificate. Now we have here information that they can download about elevation certificate and instructions on that. But in this example now, we can simply come in and drop down that information on the elevation certificate, and that part is done of the application. We're sharing, adopted codes and a hyperlink here. But now as we get into the application, we have internally in Camino a form builder. So if you'd like, this is kind of the latest and greatest way to grab information. But you will see on our form builder, we can also pull in data from your GIS. So in the example here of the parcel from your GIS, we already know what that parcel is, so we don't have to ask them. We also pulled in this property owner zip code and plan development area that they're in. And you'll also see that we don't ask the same question twice, right? If we already asked it, we can use that information. But Camino is also keeping track of mandatory fields, right? So we are not going to let an applicant submit an incomplete application. Here's the mandatory mark. So here we'll include that. Property owner address, include that. And the last, because we got 5 out of 6 right now, the last one here is just this property description. We'll say guest house, and we can save our answers. And that part's done, right? So at any point, if this applicant needed to stop for the day and go have dinner, they could log right back in and pick up where they left off. So when we talk about various plans that need to be done, you can include details as to the format that you want them in. You could include an attachment as to what you want it to look like, right? However you want it to go. And at the end of the day, they can put that together and drag and drop it in. Same thing with engineering plans, drag and drop. Now for drainage plans here, this gives you another way of collecting data, and that is, digitizing an existing PDF document. So you might have state documents, county documents that need to be filled out, and they could be brought into the system. You can see Camino can auto-populate from information we already have. And again, identify mandatory fields that have to be filled out. Quickly just race through here and put some stuff in. And when we've completed, in this example, we've now completed everything that needed to be put into this application. Camino comes back and says, well, we have everything we need. You want to submit? And they can. Now, in this example, I left out fees because don't have a credit card big enough to keep paying for these things. But again, they can see the breakdown of the fees, and you can see how they can pay for these fees here as well. So we have electronic payment providers. This one is Stripe. Stripe is an amazing electronic payment provider used by Amazon and Google. In this example, the $1,200 would come directly to you. The $3,615 would be a 2.9% fee that would go directly to Stripe. So you wouldn't collect the money and be invoiced. You wouldn't have to bother with that. But most importantly is Camino does not collect any credit card information. So you don't have to worry about being responsible for that. We just use it to get yourself paid. But now, so that's the front end, and so let's go into the back end of the service. So now on the back end of the service, let's say this individual, I'm logged in as Bob Smith here, and I walk in and I say, hey, I just submitted, but I wanted to come in and pay with a check. I wanted to come in person. Well, you can easily search for Bob by his name, by his address, by even the type of permit that he's applying for. But in this example, he's right here on top. So we'll click him and you can see he submitted it. But and you can come in and see all the information that was both shared with Bob. If he called you with a question on setbacks, you could click in and see this information that's shared with him. You can even see that question he asked earlier about setbacks, and we could even, here is your answer, and you could rattle that off here within the system as well. So, and again, saving that with the application. So we come down, all the information, the documents that were downloaded, and then we come down to the fees here that weren't paid. We could easily come in, mark them as paid. And in this example, we would say paid with check 1, 2, 3 and submit. So Bob is going to automatically get an electronic receipt for the $1,200 that he just paid. And you can see you can issue refunds as well. So that part's done as well. But also I wanted to share all that information that we collected from Bob. Now you come in and review, including the documents. And now we have the payment history, but we also have an active map showing the parcel that Bob's working from, as well as parcel information pulled from your GIS layers. So can help you to be able to look down right here and have all this parcel information available so you can make decisions on. We also share with the application the questions that were asked and how they were answered. Again, removing any he said, she said situations. We had issues in California. They have a lot of tree ordinances, tree protective things. And one of the challenges they were running into is the inspector would go out and say, you don't have a tree permit. You need a tree permit for this. We have to stop construction. And everyone would get upset and tell them, no one told me I needed a tree permit. With Camino now, they could look back at the question of, do you have trees on or near your site? And the person answered no. And so it was them that created this issue. It wasn't an error on the system or an error on the city or county. On the On the left-hand side here, we also have information details, on Bob, what he's applying for here, his address and parcel number, but we can also see other submissions at this location, right? So if Bob has multiple permits or historical permits that he's done, you can see those. But another powerful thing we bring in is you can see any code violations at his address as well. So if Bob's trying to apply for a permit, but he has a bunch of outstanding fines or code violations that he needs to rectify, you can determine whether you wait till those are cleaned up. Finally, we have this activity list, which gives a breakdown, time and date stamped, of how this permit is moving through the process. And that will include, like we talked about, the questions as well as the answers that were given in this process. So again, to remove any he said, she said, or confusion, great for when someone calls up and says, why is my permit taking so long? Well, maybe it's because you submitted an incorrect plan. I asked you for an update and it took you 3 weeks to supply me with an updated document. So you'll have that history right there with the application. We have the ability now, right internal within the system, to request changes or even add steps to the process. I'm not going to go into that because time-wise, but just know that that's there. And again, keeping everything within the application, not going outside to an email, and where things can get lost. But the next powerful piece to our system is the idea of workflows. Camino has, again, with no coding and very easy to use, the ability to generate workflows. And you obviously can build workflows for everything from code enforcement, planning and zoning, whatever. In this example, we're working on this one here. And coming here, the big thing, hopefully everyone sees, is the ease of use. Simply, literally, you can drag the direction of this workflow. You can add additional steps in the workflow process. Very easy to maintain. And we're going to be going in this direction on the workflow. And I wanted to share, as we go in to this plan review concurrent step, if we come over here to more options, as we move through the various status steps, it adds steps in the process. So as we workflow in one direction, it would add these steps. If we workflow in another, it add potentially different steps. You can see how in the example of plan review, we can assign this to a department, or we can also assign it to an individual. If Caitlin gets all our building department stuff, we can just set it up for that. You can also determine whether it's a mandatory field or not, and very easily remove it or even add additional steps. So again, no coding involved, very easy to do. So if we come back to our submittal, let's say an individual is notified of this, that this submittal came in, they review it, it's all good. And so we come up to our update our status, and we update the status to, in this example, we're going in the direction we talked about, the plan review concurrent step. We're also going to notify the applicant, so they're going to be made aware. That's marked up as yes, and we're going to update our status. So with our plan review is now in plan review concurrent stage, and that, as we talked about, added these 3 steps, right? But at the same time, your applicant, and this is my personal email box here that's getting all these updates. I'm getting, as the applicant, I'm getting email that it changed to an updated status. And if I want, I can click in and view my submission, which would take me right back here. And so I could come in, see that I'm in a plan review concurrent stage, and I also see these 3 additional steps in the process. As they're reviewed and approved, I'll also be alerted to that. So no more, what's the status of my permit, right? They're going to be alerted and updated all the time. So we have these reviews. And in this example, let's say I say, okay, I'm going to assign this to David Marshall, and I'm going to give Dave a week to do the work. By assigning that to me, I, as someone involved in the city or county, I'm going to get an email that I have a task to do. I can click on a link into the application. I'm already in here now, and come here into my inbox, and I have a list of all of the tasks that have been assigned to me. And in this example, this is the one we just assigned to me with this due date, right? So I'll jump in here, and my job here is, this is a plan review. So we can, as you can see, we can integrate with electronic plan review systems if you have them, ePlansoft, Bluebeam, but about 85 to 90% of our customers use free options. And in this example, let's say I come in and say, all right, let's add my documents. So here are the documents in this application. I'm going to select plot plans. I'm going to bring this into Adobe, a free Adobe option, and mark it up. And then I'm going to add my markups here to back into the system, right? So here's my reviewed plot plan V1. I could also now include comments back to the applicant, reviewed, whatever, or I could also include internal notes, watch out for whatever. And these would only be shared internally with city or county people, right? So in this example, I've done my work. I say I'm all done, and we can come back into the submission, and everyone, within the city and town and the applicant now know, because the applicant's going to get notified that that part's done, can see that that's done, right? Now, I'm not going to bore everyone and go through that over and over again, but let's assume planning did their part, fire did their part, and in this example, everything was good, and the system automatically, in this example, workflowed to a permit issued state. Again, if someone on the other side is saying that's not the way we do it, we can configure it to the way you do it as well. This is just an example. In this example, you can see we automatically generated a building permit placard, right? And auto-populated it with information from the application itself. And we also added additional steps of inspections that need to be done. Only one in this example is required. So let's say the individual goes off and does their work. Because they have their building permit, but it comes time to set up and request an inspection. They can come right back into Camino and request an inspection. In this example, we'll say, can you do it tomorrow? And we give them morning, afternoon, or no preference. We'll say morning. They'll enter in their cell phone number and request the inspection. On your side, the inspector gets the request for an inspection, comes in, sees the request for tomorrow in the morning, and says, you know what, I'm going to give it to that guy, Dave Marshall, because he does good work, and we're going to schedule it. Dave has some time in the morning, and it looks like 11 o'clock is going to work for him, and so let's confirm, right? The individual will, both Dave Marshall will receive the task, and the individual on the other side will receive an email to expect Dave at tomorrow at 11. So fast forwarding to tomorrow, Dave Marshall has his list of tasks. He clicks into this one, which brings him here. And he, as you can see, he can look at the entire submission if he wants. But he comes in and he has, in this example, he has a checklist of things that he needs to do based on the type of permit. Other cities have like a PDF document that they have him check things off. Others have comments that they have him fill out, and the comments roll up to a form. Again, however it works best for you. In this example, we're going to complete this checklist. I'm on the job site. And in this example, I'm just going to say, just grabbing some words off the side here, but I can come in and put put the information in that I want. I can also add attachments. I could be snapping a bunch of pictures here. Let me find a picture that I can drag and drop in a picture that is included. I could have 15 pictures here, right, that are all stored, and go on to the next, step that I need to check off. You'll see that we can also include a message template. So in this example, if I wanted to, if this was something I put in a lot, I could very simply go in to the message template and include that, and it'll auto-populate it there on the spot. So now in saving these changes, we can go back to the inspection and complete it. So in this example, we're going to pass him. You can see how if it was a fail, we could automatically set up a follow-up inspection task, because there will have to be a follow-up, even the ability to generate an inspection report here on the fly. But we're going to complete this inspection, and that part is done, right? So coming back down to this inspection, these two aren't mandatory, so we're skipping over. The last thing we need to do here is complete a certificate of completion. You can see again, pulling in data from the application. The only thing mandatory here that left to be done is a signature, and I can issue this document. And in this example, Camino now will automatically workflow to a permit final state, right? So everything's been passed back and forth. This one's done, but for your applicant, they also have all this information on their application itself. So you can see up here at the top, issued documents that were given to them, details that they shared on the application, documents that they uploaded, and also even reviewed documents, a map, the payment that they made, and even they have an activity list of how this all went down, time-stamped as well. So you're informing them as much as you're informing yourself. On the submission side, all your, business licensing, planning and zoning permits, building permits could be here, but we give you the ability to easily slice and dice this information the way it works best for you. On the left-hand side, you can see you can easily select your columns, what you want to see. One person cares about something that someone else doesn't care about, but we can also even filter down on a date range. Let's just look at what happened last month. We can look at submission types. I only want to see residential building projects. Or you could even go as far as, I want to see new custom homes that have been applied for in the city or county. So the ability for you to slice and dice this information however you want, and at the end, as you can see up here at the top right, export it into a CSV file, send it off to city council or whoever. But also we give you the ability to save these views. So If you have a city council report, you don't have to regenerate these filters. You do it once and save it, click on it, and send it right off to them. Easy enough. We also share with you an active map of all this activity, code violations, building permits, etc., and give you the ability now, again, to slice and dice this information down, and even down to residential building projects, however you want to filter it. And in this example, you come and click on this project, you'll see some basic details on it. And if you wanted to, you could click and go into that application itself. Camino is also sharing an active report. I want to share the city of Syracuse, New York's report. They're an active user of our system. So this is more real data. So again, we could say, let's look over the last month, and Camino will share, and this is the usage of your system. So now, let's say city council wants to see if you're getting a good ROI and get usage on your system. You could see how many people for Syracuse. They have 1,475 people that have come to the site. 624 of them have started a guide. 106 of them have generated a guide, and 339 of these people have applied for a permit, right? So, but what we also do is sit down with you on a monthly basis, and these are areas where people are stopping in the process. And maybe they're just stopping because they want to stop, or maybe they're getting confused. And so maybe we can work with you to improve your system so these numbers get smaller. You can also see at a glance when people are coming into the system. In Syracuse, you can see people are coming in before 6 o'clock in the morning or even after 6 o'clock at night, because the system's easy to use. They don't need you to help them, so they don't have to wait till you're open. You can also see top submission types out there. And even we allow if an applicant is having trouble finding a certain thing, we allow them to type down on that, and so it would help you to say, why are they having trouble finding that? And again, maybe a way of improving the process. We have a question here that said, with open records freedom of information requirements, is there a file created at the end that can be viewed by, let's say, a neighbor that has requested to see a permit? Great question. We have with our system, what you're seeing here is only accessible by internal users. But we also have a data warehouse of real-time, all the same information that Camino is taking in. This data warehouse is bringing in. So what the city or county can do is, whether your GIS person wants to create an active map showing permits that have been applied for, and if they clicked on it, it would share specific, it maybe obviously wouldn't share all the information, but would share the information that you wanted to share on the permit or license being applied for. It could also be put into a spreadsheet, however best you want it to share, but that information can be kept up through that data warehouse. Yep. We also obviously, have all your payments are here as well, and we can, your finance team can set up a very easy filter to be able to very easily export and import this into your finance system that you have as well. Wanted to touch on very quickly, I see we're running short on time, but I also wanted to share quickly the code enforcement side. So if we go over to cases, which is our code enforcement piece, you could see the code team can very easily generate their own codes if they're out on the street, or they could take them, from someone logging, coming in through the website, making you aware of something there. A piece that I wanted to bring up before I forget again is for code violations and for inspectors, Camino also has an app that they can utilize out on the road. The challenge for people out on the road is internet access is sometimes good, sometimes it doesn't exist. With the app, it is when you're in wireless coverage or cell coverage, it's continually updating the system and keeping it current. But if the inspector fell out of coverage at a certain site, the app just keeps, the inspector doesn't even know it happened. So he can continue on with his inspections. He can add his photos, complete his inspections. And when he comes into coverage, again, he doesn't even need to do anything. The system automatically pulls that data out and keeps it updated. So pretty powerful piece. On the code enforcement side, it's slightly different. Uses the same functionality like workflow and inspections and things. One of the different things is they can go to a site, and what we're finding is many times there's multiple violations, right? And so we can load the system up with all their violations, so they can quickly just click on them to load them, put some simple comments about what needs to be done, and and generate the violation letter. As they follow up, you can see they have the ability here to very easily resolve the issue. Many times they show up, they did 2, but they left 1 unresolved, as an example. So as we go through this process, again, a lot like what we've already seen. Now, as we generate a violation letter, it also includes that legal mumbo jumbo here, as well as their comments at the bottom on these violations. And as they're resolved, if they generate another one, the only one that's unresolved would be on this piece. So for lack of time, I want to go off to questions here. And someone asked here, can you generate code violations from Camino? And hopefully you just asked that before I showed you, but yes, you can. Absolutely. That can be generated. And we have a lot of our code violation guys out on the street that are doing that today, printing them off, leaving a door hanger, again, working with your processes on how that works. And same thing with workflow. What's the workflow process? And all those items. Another question that came up here is, is the guide able to be sold separately? And it is. In fact, we have a bunch. The Tampa example I gave about the guide that they needed. They had a multi-million-dollar permit system that obviously they weren't going to throw away, but their system didn't have a way to generate answers before the permit process. Now, our permit system has that all bundled together, but for them, they needed it as a standalone, and so those we handled it that way. Another question here is, will your system work for code enforcement, planning, zoning permits? You saw the code enforcement, so that was probably just a question before that, but planning and zoning permits, absolutely. In fact, we just had the city of Albany, New York, came on with us for a planning and zoning permit system. They didn't need a building permit system. They had that, but the planning and zoning permit or planning and zoning department was generating permits paper-based, and they needed a system. So that's a great example of that. Here's a question here on, do you price by license and are modules sold separately? Modules are not sold separately. It's all a bundled package. So everything I spoke to here, you see the code enforcement, permits, licenses, all that stuff is all one package. And with Camino, we offer unlimited licenses. And great question. We have a separate question here that says, can outside agencies have access to the system? With Camino, unlimited licenses, but that can also include outside agencies. We have some cities with third-party inspectors that aren't part of the city, but they get their alerts of tasks and inspections that they need to have done, which is a neat use of our system. We have other outside health inspectors that may be a part of a business license process that get alerted, and they have tasks to do, even though they're agencies outside the city or county. So yeah, as creative as you want to get. And again, you can limit access to the system in that way as well. So good. Looks like we made it. Unless there's any final questions, looks like we made it within our allotted time. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much. Again, I will be following up with a recording of this. And if there are any questions, my email will include my contact information as well. So thank you very much for attending. Bye-bye.